Well, honestly, when I grew up, music was not something that I wanted to do. My dad had played in bands in high school, and he actually led worship in church when I was growing up as a kid. So I was around music. I can remember going to like music practice and things like that. But my desire was not to play music. I wanted to be a basketball player. So I grew up, dreaming of playing in the pros one day. And when I was in high school, got mixed up with the wrong crowd. I grew up in church, and I have amazing family that really planted the seed early. But like most kids do, we kind of do our own thing. And I remember 10th, 11th grade, started getting mixed up in drugs and alcohol. And by my senior year in high school, I had some Division I scholarship offers, and I lost them. Got in trouble. Dropped out of high school, got a GED. My dad owned a construction company, so I went to work for him. While I was out working for him for a year, I tried out for a junior college. I made that team and got a full scholarship. I went to school, moved 3 hours away, lived in Northwest Arkansas. And the day before my freshman season started, we were doing a walk-through practice, and I stepped on a guy's foot jumping up to dunk a basketball and tore 5 ligaments in my ankle and redshirted my freshman year. And I remember my roommate had this old guitar that was sitting in the corner of our apartment, and I picked it up and started playing around on it. And I bought a chord chart and posted it on the wall and sat at the edge of my bed and taught myself how to play guitar my freshman year. I just fell in love with music, and I was taking a creative writing class in college, and started taking some of the poems that I was writing and trying to write songs, and kind of figured out pretty quick that I had something kind of going on. And from there on, it was like, the basketball was forgotten about, and music was what I wanted to do with my life. And I just felt like I could tell stories and, seasons of life that I was in through these songs. It took me down some pretty dark roads, though, for a couple of years, and, well, say a couple of years, for like 10 years. Yeah. And, made a lot of bad decisions playing that. Thought I had to be thought I needed to be this rock star and live up to this, kind of persona that I'd created for myself. And it wasn't until, 29, 30 years old, I met my wife, and she had 2 small kids when we met. Soon after that, we had 2 kids of our own, and there's just a lot of things I needed to change about my life, and I knew that it wasn't going to be easy, and we fought for the first 4 years of our marriage all the time about what I was doing. And in 2012, I was leaving to go to Europe, and I was just at this point in my life where I was about to lose my family and lose my wife, and I kind of made this prayer to God. I said, I know you're real. I've grown up with you. I need you to prove to me that you're out there. And while I was on that tour, I heard Big Daddy Weave's song "Redeemed" come across a radio station in Spain on a tour bus, and I remember listening to that song over and over in my hotel room that night. And I called my wife, and I was like, "Look, as soon as I get home from this tour, I'm done. I'm quitting my band. I'm gonna go to church, canceling the rest of my shows." And she kind of thought, "What is going on?" She thought I was full of it, but I remember coming home from that and never looking back, and that really was the start to what we're doing now. It was like the turning point in my life where I think God said, "Okay, you've all the things that you've done and lived through. Now I'm going to give you an opportunity to share that, and bring glory to me." So, yeah. I was working at a church after I gave my life to the Lord. We started going to this church, and for about a year we just went, and they eventually asked me to start leading some worship, and it's pretty cool because the first song I ever led at church was Big Daddy Weave's song "Redeemed," and got to play that. And then not long after that, they asked me to launch a campus, and so I launched a campus at this church with some other people. And while I was working there, a guy from Nashville and his wife came over to visit at Christmas, and his producer named Jonathan Smith and his wife's family were members of our church, and Jonathan was from my hometown, and I never knew him. Like I'd never known the guy. We were, I was about 10 years older than him, so we'd never really ran around in the same circles. But he heard me sing at Christmas, and he took me to coffee a couple days later, and he was like, "Look, like, what's the deal with your, you got to have a story. I know you got a story." And I was like, "Yeah," and I shared it with him, and he said, "Why don't you come to Nashville, and we start writing some music?" So I started driving to Nashville on the weekends. And I think we wrote Chainbreaker like the 3rd trip over. Really? And I just remember that day. I remember it pretty clear because it was end of the week. I'd been there for about 4 or 5 days. It was a Friday. And he was like, "We're going to write with a girl named Mia Fields. She's really awesome. She's written a bunch of songs." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I know who she is." I was a nervous wreck. Jonathan was like, she wants to write with you. we're gonna just get together and work on a song. And I was like, man, I have nothing left in the tank. Like, I don't have any ideas. Like, what are we gonna do? And we sat in a room for about 2 hours, and we just started talking about what God was doing in our lives. And I shared my story. She had some things going on in her family, that she was sharing with me, and we were just talking about it. And at the time, me and my wife were very involved in the prison ministry in our home church, and she knew that, and we were talking about it, and I was just talking about all the things that I'd seen God do in this prison ministry. And she said, you need to write a song called Chainbreaker. Just kind of blurted it out. And I was like, what? And I was like, can we do that? And she was like, you can do it. And she was like, and people are going to believe you. And I was like, wow. And so I remember Jonathan just kind of spun around at the piano, and he was playing some different stuff. And when I heard that opening line of Chainbreaker, he played it. And the first thing out of my mouth was like, if you've been walking the same old road for miles and miles. And Mia goes, what'd you say? And he kept playing, and I kept kind of singing stuff. And 20 minutes later, we wrote the song. And I remember driving back to Arkansas just thinking, man, this is a special song. And so for the next several months when I drive back to Nashville, I would just pray that God would just take this one song. I remember at the time, Soul on Fire was a big song, and I would listen to it all the time. And I was like, God, just give me one of those songs. Like, I need a song like that just catches, And sure enough, a few months later, somebody at the label heard it, and out of that song, they offered me a record deal just through the demo. And I signed with them, and we put that song out a month later, and, here we are. So it's been pretty crazy. Being in prison ministry, it was always a dream to go in and record something in a prison. And Jonathan being from Arkansas, me being from Arkansas, we both grew up within an hour from where Johnny Cash was born. So, I knew all about Folsom Prison. Yeah. I've always grown up loving Johnny Cash's music. We were tossing around the idea after the Chainbreaker album came out, like, how cool would it be one day to get to go into a prison and record a record? And in between the album and this new album that's coming out, there were some ideas tossed around. I was like, well, why don't we just go into a prison and record all these, all of our favorite songs off this record again, but do an acoustic version and go in and minister to these guys. And so I partnered with an organization here in Tennessee called Men of Valor, and they helped us, really, they really pulled some strings to help us get in here and take all this equipment in. And if you've seen the videos or if you've heard, the record, there was no coaching these guys. There was no, okay, hey, we want you to sing this or do this. It was 6 hours of spending the day with a bunch of men who, in the beginning, when you walked into the room and just felt it, there was an eerie, dark, hopeless, vibe in that room. And I just remember thinking, like, what am I going to say to a bunch of guys in prison? I've never been in prison, and I just kind of opened the whole day with, I could have easily been where you're at. And that was kind of my story. And I shared just what God had done in my life. And I think through 6 hours of hanging with these guys and playing these songs, we watched it turn to hope in Jesus, and we saw this wall between us and them kind of drop. And before the day was over, we threw lyrics on the wall, and these guys were singing and, and having the best time. And it was just amazing to get to see, it's really cool to see what God can do. And just such a short period of time. And that's a special day for me. It's proof that God can use anybody. He can take anything and turn it around. For years of my life, I thought that I grew up with this, picture of God, that he was just sitting on a throne with his arms crossed all day long, watching every little thing you did, just shaking his head. And, it never hit me until I experienced his grace and mercy, like just how much he loves us. And it's just like your own children, For me, there's nothing that my kids could ever do that would turn me away from him. And that's the same love that he has for us. And not only is that an amazing feeling, but there's an amazing feeling in knowing there's freedom in that, to know that, okay, I'm struggling today. I don't got it all together. I'm not perfect. Well, the positive side of that is he knew that before I ever had a name, and he sent Jesus to die for that. So for me to know that I don't have to have it all together, and I'm not ever going to have it all together, that for me is like the most amazing thing, to know that he's going to love me no matter what, and it's nothing that I have to do to get him to do that. So, yeah, and I try to write about that, and I try to write about those experiences, and hopefully they connect. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Rescue Story was actually a song that was initially brought to me by by a guy named Ethan Hulse. He's another songwriter. There was part of the chorus had been written, and there were some things that I loved about it and some things that I didn't. And I remember sitting with Jonathan one day, and we kind of rewrote a few lyrics on the chorus, and then we started really trying to make that verse, and bridge feel like, okay, this is my story I want to tell. And I think for me, I wanted to share just almost this journey of faith of where I've come from 20 years ago to where I am now. And, growing up in church with just this amazing family and this amazing, example of Christ, like with my mom and dad, I remember in my 20s and 30s getting to a place where I thought, I don't even know if there's a God out there that loves me or that can forgive me. But then realizing after 20 years of running away from God and stumbling through life with one bad decision after another, when I hit the ground and cried out for God to save me, just realizing that He was always there and had never left me, that was what I wanted this song to be about. Everybody who's ever been in that situation has a rescue story. And like I said, God knew you before you had a name, and He's been singing songs over your life. And so that's what I wanted this song to I wanted it to strike a chord with anybody who's been there or experienced that they can go, you know what, I've felt that, or I have a rescue story. And those rescue stories are things that we can share with others, and maybe somebody's struggling. You can say, look, I was in the same place you were, but this is what God did for me, and He can do it for you. And I think that's a win for the kingdom. So. It's amazing. I mean, honestly, it's overwhelming sometimes to really think about that God can take some, kid from, nowhere in Arkansas and, just growing up in this small town where things like this never really happened, and having the past and the struggles that I've had, to seeing people singing my songs and to knowing, I know that it's not got anything to do with me. I know that it's a God thing, because I tried to make things like this happen for so long in my life. But it's also very humbling and such just an amazing feeling to know that when you sat down with an idea or a song on your heart and you write it, with hopes that it's going to reach somebody and help them, like A Fear Is a Liar, or Survivor, or Chain Breaker. And then you see the videos and you hear the stories of people that, have been on the verge of, suicide, and hearing a song, it's that's so cool to know that God hears your prayers and is using the songs exactly the way you hoped He'd use them for whenever you wrote them. That to me is better than anything that I could ever, win or receive or whatever. That's just it's the coolest thing, Yeah, it is. Because like I've told people, I was finishing construction, 6 years ago, working a construction job. So it's pretty crazy. I remember growing up with my parents praying Jeremiah 29:11 over me every night. And of course, your mom and dad are going to tell you that, you're going to have this awesome, amazing life. And we're praying that you're just, blessed. And we want that for our kids. And I wanted it for myself. And I never truly understood that verse until just this past year. I've been able to look back. I've looked back to 20, 30 years ago in the moments where I didn't even realize God was at. And I can look back now and go, okay, He was there working out that. He was keeping me out of this. He allowed me to live through that moment. And that's what this record I feel like this record has allowed me to kind of sit back and take in some of the things that have happened in just the last few years and go, okay, I want to write some songs about that and share with people what God's done in my life over the last, 40 years.